All right. So, Steve, it is such a great pleasure to have you here today. I'm sure we're going to have an awesome conversation. But before we get into that side of it, our reason for being here is to share what's going on and to how we bridge worlds from the inner and outer, because we live in two worlds, basically, an inner and outer one. And these conversations are designed to draw out those inner experiences and share them with others so that others don't feel so weird or goofy or rejected or insane or any of those kinds of self-deprecating activities that one has in their mind. Having said that, I know you've had a rich background in your own exploration. When did it begin? When did you first notice that interconnectedness in your activities and the life around you? Do you remember when that was and what it was like?
I didn't realize it until 70 years later that I had an epigenetic experience when I was 5 years old.
Okay. And epigenetic, would you explain that a little bit so that our audience will be informed?
That is a biological process where um, genes can be expressed without changing the sequence of amino acids that make up the gene. So what happens is that you create molecules such as methyl groups, acyl groups, phosphate groups, histone modifications, which is a part of the chromatin idea, that's in your DNA.
Okay.
Um, but anytime you think and you go through a stressful experience, which I have redefined what stress is, by the way, um, you you can have attached on your DNA. They've done most of their research with the methyl groups, and if you put a methyl group on a DNA, you can silence it or turn it on.
Okay. So
That
back to the experience, because this is what I really want to delve into. What happened?
you there?
Okay, this isn't going to work, Steve.
I don't know what happened.
Here we go. Steve, it's so great to have you here today. Thank you so much, and I appreciate all of the effort that we've made and you made in order to be here now. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. So, as you know, our conversation is going to look into the inner and the outer realities that we experience as children, adults, and so on and so forth, to share those experiences so that others can find solace in their own experience, because it's something that if you don't have anybody to talk to that understands or has had a similar experience, folks often think you're kind of wacko. And we don't want that because it's a natural evolutionary process in all of us that we have and yet oftentimes deny later on in life. So in this, and you called it earlier, epigenetic experience that you had at 5 years old, what was that like? What do you remember of its intimate ex expressions?
Would you like to know the event?
I would love to.
My father was a compulsive gambler. He had spent a whole night out on Saturday. Got home late, or early Sunday morning.
Hmm.
So he went to sleep late, and he had two kids in the next room: a 5-year-old me and a 2-year-old my brother. And we were just being kids on Sunday morning, playing, making noise. And he slapped the wall or banged on the wall 3 times, and that cadence stays in your mind.
Mm,
Because every time I hear the bump, bump, bump
right.
on the wall, it recalls that memory. So he said to be quiet. And naturally, for about 3 seconds, we were quiet, which is an eternity for a 5-year-old. And he banged on the wall again, and we still weren't quiet. He came in and punched me in the arm. And it's interesting for a 5-year-old. I knew to this day. I remember what arm and between the muscles hit the bone. It hurt, but I remember two things
How
for
awful.
all this time: that it hurt, but that my hero did it to me. my father.
Isn't it interesting how we often will ascribe love to someone no matter, and hero worship, right? No matter what their behavior is toward us.
Well, that's a 5-year-old perspective. That
Right,
changed
right. That's what I
dramatically
mean.
later on in life.
Yeah.
I had a
That's
totally
what we've
different.
learned. That's the early imprinting of what love is, right?
Well, the interesting thing, since just to complete the story, um, he promised he would never do that again. Punch me. And
Hmm.
3 weeks went by. Again, interesting for a 5-year-old to remember 3 weeks. I don't know why, but 3 weeks went by and he did it again. And I remember two things. He lied, and I didn't want to be like him. I
Mm.
verbalized to myself, I don't want to be like you. That was a decision that I came to realize 70 years later is the way to access our DNA. I know I'm not supposed to talk about that, but that's who we are.
That's fine. I understand that. So in that, then as you developed and you understood that this was not cool, you didn't want to be like him, what did it prompt you to do as a young person growing up and the noticeable events that you faced where you had that choice and you made one to step up rather than step down? That
I
makes sense.
studied I studied not to be like him. Everything he did that I was around, I criticized so I wouldn't be like him. And
Hmm.
I believe ultimately it changed my personality from a type A to a type B because he was a type A. I could have
Hmm.
just easily made a decision to say I want to be just like him because this is to get what you want. I could beat
Right.
people up, lie, and get what I want. But I decided not to be like him, and I don't have the type A personality nor the heart disease that's associated with it.
Sure. And then you found out that you could be a good person and still get what you want.
Oh, I didn't know anything about being a good person then. 5 years
Right.
old, you know.
No, but this is why I was asking when you were growing up as a boy, a youth, a teenager, what did that mean to you in the way that you approach life, studies, social environments, friends?
The biggest thing for me was that in high school, I was one of the tallest in the school.
Hmm.
When I was 15 years old, I played junior varsity um, football. I was 6'3", 259 pounds.
Wow.
I was professional football size. I couldn't get a date. I was way too big for the girls. And that sits on a young man's psyche, you
Oh,
know?
yeah,
And
absolutely.
so that tore me down. And interestingly enough, ironically, my father then turned around and said, don't worry, they'll be chasing you. Because he knew how big I was going to be.
Hmm.
And that, girls kind of like that as you get older.
Eventually, yeah, you protect them.
So that was where it went. The trying to get out of the shell that I put myself in for. I didn't even go to my high school prom because I didn't have a date.
Mm,
So that's where it was at the time. But
sure.
I did okay in sports. I was on the track team. I threw the shot put, did well there. But it, it, it even went into college. The first couple of years of college were difficult for me because I didn't have the mentality to do the kind of work that they require in college.
I
When I
can relate to that. I had difficulties myself. I was brainiac in high school and didn't have to study much and still was on the honor roll and
yeah,
almost the class salutatorian. However, when I got into college and pre-med, I didn't have the study habits I needed.
that was the point. The
Yep.
study habit, the emotional maturity
Yep.
that it takes to put everything else aside and say, "This is what I want. I'm going to do whatever it takes to do it." And in that regard, and interestingly enough, I was probably one of the first persons in the United States to tape college lectures to make sure I got all the notes.
So this would have had to have been what, late 60s, early 70s?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you're right. That's,
Nobody was
have
doing that.
micro, we didn't even have micro cassettes then. It was
Yes.
still,
I know.
full
It
blown.
was you had the microphone attached to the little cassette recorder, and I had to put it right up in front in the row, to make sure that the teacher would be able to speak in it and I'd hear it. And then I took it home just to show you how crazy I was in wanting, to become a doctor. I went home and transcribed every single word from every single course that I took with the tape recorder. Every word.
That is a phenomenal exercise for two reasons. One, it puts it into the file system, right? But it does it two ways. Not only are you, or three ways, not only you're listening, you're seeing as you're writing, and you've got the kinesthetic input. So that's invariably embedded in your consciousness, right? Did you find that, and did it make things a little easier in test taking?
Um, I did very well after I figured that out.
Hmm.
I went the last 2 years. I mean, because I wasn't doing very well in my first 2 years, but the last 2 years, I wound up getting 6 A's and 2 B's. I aced
Did
biology,
you
which
say
is
you were to be or not to be? Hmm?
kind of, but my lowest grades were in physics. Got the 2 B's. I got 4 A's in chemistry, and out of that, it taught me about entropy, and I became a philosopher as a result
Ah.
of
So
entropy.
entropy is an interesting subject. Now, I find that, in closed systems, yeah, they probably do fall apart, but yet we often see the universe as chaotic and don't really recognize the intricacy um, and efficacy in it because we don't see it ourselves, first of all. How,
Well, we're too close up,
right, and we're looking out instead of in.
right?
In this development that you had in college, I can imagine, I know what that's like. How did that bring you into your quest to understand yourself and how you work and the intimacy that you have with creation, for lack of a better? I know it's
Well,
kind of woo-woo, but I think you understand what I mean. Because
yeah.
how does yourself grow to interact with life most effectively?
Well, as I was closing out my my high school career, I was 17 years old.
Hmm.
My my father lost his sister to breast cancer.
Mm.
That was a very interesting experience for me because I didn't have a medical background at the time, but I sensed very strongly that there was a relationship between the event that she was going through and the illness she developed. Talk about going inward.
Hmm.
And I
Look
couldn't
well
explain
to
it to
the
anybody.
spine, right? That was the first indicator.
Say again.
Look well to the spine. That's, that was stated by, I think it was either Plato or Aristotle and Hippocrates that eventually picked up on it. Um, to me, it focuses the attention internally first. That's where the source of all our dis-ease comes from. So
Yeah, but
how
who
did
knew?
you find that?
Well, that's what I'm saying. The first experience that I had, well, interestingly enough, we go back a little bit. When I was 10 years old, my father again was having conversations at a very high level, yelling and screaming at friends who came over to the house for intervention type of meetings. And
Right.
so everybody had the righteousness of their position. And it occurred to me at 10 years old, they all couldn't be right. Somebody had to be wrong. 7 years later, my aunt winds up dying, and I see a connection between dis-ease and uh, life events at 17. And
Hmm.
the next thing after that was going into medical school, dental school, and noticing that there was a relationship between the health histories that people were filling out for me and the person who they were sitting in the chair.
Sure.
And then I was off. I started to read. I went into the National Library of Medicine. I now had the medical background and the scientific background, to handle the information.
Sure.
But there was a wall. You can only go so far. That the capstone for me was epigenetics. I don't know. I know you don't want to get too technical, but just then this should be just between me and you. You've heard of CERN, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely.
So when CERN came up with the Higgs boson,
Ooh.
that was the capstone for my epigenetic quest.
Okay, let me ask you. No, so when they discovered that, this is part I have some questions about that. And I asked one of Lawrence Krauss's TAs at a science cafe here locally.
I
And
listened.
so for the viewers, the Higgs boson is a particle that doesn't have any mass that gives mass to others, and their experiment at CERN was to discover this particle. And in so doing, they ran two protons into each other at near light speed and expected to find a particle, the Higgs boson, as a result. Well, back up from that a little bit. You're ramming two protons at almost light speed. So you got a subatomic explosion, and you're going to have a particle that's created out of that as a fused, yet giving no mass to others. What it makes more sense to me, understanding M theory and others, Nepean-Close's triadic dimensional distinction vortical paradigm that says we have, or there are consciousness, space, and time is tethered across 9 dimensions for the human experience. It's a theory of everything paper, the quantum physics that they've written, introduced in 2010, I think. So these kinds of things make a good cause for seeing that apparent, um, the discovery, actually, it was the interpretation of the data that they thought left a trail of a particle because they saw it as decaying, correct? I really didn't see a particle. So what makes more sense to me is that that explosion actually caused a rip in between the fabric in that liminal space, if you will, between dimensions. They didn't know how to read it because they didn't understand it yet. And they assumed that a particle was created because that's what they were looking for.
And it seemed to give mass.
To what, though?
Well, that was my quest. When I was in practice and making these connections between how a person is in their life and the life events that caused health and disease,
Mm-hmm.
I asked myself, what is it in a thought, a stress, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
for a life event that can transform a brain wave, an energy wave, into a particle? And that's where the double slit experiment came in. Because
Okay.
all you have to do is observe the double slit experiment and you see a particle become a wave.
Oh, but then according to quantum theory, the observer, makes all the difference in the world.
Absolutely. That was the 5-year-old Zen.
Right.
I made an observation at 5 years old. I collapsed the wave function into a particle, into the chemistry needed not to be like my father.
Now, okay, so is that a particle or vibration? Because I understand that, in quantum physics, there's no matter. There really is no matter. It's all vibrating strings, if you will. And the only way that it becomes a particle is through our observation of it, not necessarily our projection, but our observation. That takes I don't want to say completely different, but that's another level of understanding and data acquisition, if you will, that takes place that gives one the ability to understand that collaborative opportunity, if you will, between the thoughts and the body willing to Okay, well then, we're just gonna have to, regardless. All right.
Okay. Um, it was the observer, the person who was doing the measurement in the double slit experiment, which the physicists surmised was part of the experiment. The act of measurement was an energy that collapsed the electron particle into a wave, and the proof of that wave function was that the waves interfered with each other as it came out on the other side of the slits, and as they fell, as the waves fell on the other side of the barrier, it set up the interference pattern that only waves can produce.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how they knew a particle turned into a wave, and the only thing they had as a variable was the measurer. I
Now,
looked at
how do you think we equate that? So you and I both, and I think we're both on this quest, is figuring out, okay, how do we integrate this understanding and make it practical in our daily activities as far as being co-creators and collaborators in creating the kind of reality that we know is possible. I'll put it that way. Um, how do we do that? Where does that understanding of how the observer affects and is part of the experiment, how do we translate that into operational capacity for our daily living?
visualization. Visualization is what the observer did in the double slit experiment. That's what
Okay,
I did. That's what I did when my father punched me.
sure.
Every time I hear the word make a decision or being decisive, I know that that person is unknowingly using the quantum energy fields to collapse waves into particles, just like you can collapse stress.
Sure. Well, choice is the key, right? That's the only thing that we actually control is
Well,
our
that was,
choice.
but I also wanted to show people that they have that propensity in and of itself gave them access to the quantum energy fields of the universe that they don't know they have access to.
Right. And how many times have we heard, you make a choice, you start in the direction the universe will support you, right? Those kinds of things. It's everywhere. It's in scripture, it's in entrepreneur studies, and
How does the universe support you?
yeah.
How?
How?
See, that's the thing that's where I start to go away from the I guess the tried and true path, so to speak. The
Uh,
universe doesn't provide you with anything. Everything that happens to you in the universe, you provide.
I
If you
agree with
if
you
you think
because
you are,
again, because it's that choice and the depth of that choice or the curiousness first to ask the questions that drive you into the deeper levels from which you can make choices.
well, that was the whole point. See, the law of attraction, which I'm sure you've heard of,
A little bit.
sounds like the universe is participating in the benevolence that you see as an
It's
attraction.
neutral. The universe doesn't give a shit. It's neutral.
Yeah, that's right. It doesn't know a thing. Do you
Yeah.
know what the law of attraction is?
I know that it's only been half realized because or at least most people hear law of attraction, they think that they can sit and think and attract, and it doesn't work that way. There's attention, intention, and interaction.
Anyone who agrees with you is attracted to you. That's the law of attraction. Nobody gets attracted to your life if they disagree. That's pretty profound. It straightens people right out, I think, if they stop seeing that there's something out there that controls them, that wants them to become successful or not by attracting good or evil to you. And now you set up all the religions and all the sociological
Yeah,
things
I don't
and
buy the good
the
and evil
political
thing.
stuff.
What
But
I
that's
do buy is the
the
choice again.
yeah.
And having been in relationships, there's a navigation, there's a negotiation, there's in those places of disagreement, that comes from your historical perspectives, right? You're dragging your baggage with you at that point.
Your culture.
In that moment, when you have that apparent disagreement, is it really a disagreement or is it just something that you have different opinions upon that you're unwilling to discuss and resolve?
Now we're getting into the human nature.
Uh,
I have a whole chapter of it in my book. What is the human nature, Zen?
well, I believe the human nature is driven by the desire to love and be loved.
And what if I were to tell you that the human nature is all about winning, controlling, dominating, and being right for the sake of Darwinian survival?
I would say there is a school of thought that supports that. I don't
Show me,
particularly.
show me the school of thought that does not involve the human nature to win, control, dominate, and be right. If you have a thought, the thought must be couched in winning, controlling, dominating, and being right, including love. I've tested it for decades.
Here's where quantum entanglement comes in because there has to be that collaborative thing, whether it's now on a level of intentionality, perhaps of desiring a good outcome or one that resonates with others, whatever that project, plan, whatever needs to happen. It's the resonance with others that allows it to continue. Is that something that is a dominance thing, or is it something that we acquiesce to flow of once we've made a choice to attempt to create together?
That's an agreement to win, control, dominate, and be right in the same venue. That's all it is.
It's an interesting perspective. I'll have to sit on that for a while and mull it over,
And,
but I may end up with, in total agreement with you, which has happened before. I don't know everything, and I'm willing to, have the environment here, hopefully,
look at
to
the
be
example.
psychologically safe and intellectually humble, because I don't know everything. You don't know everything.
Look at
Uh,
your examples. You grew up in a society which has institutions associated with it. I submit to you that every single institution that mankind has ever come up with, like the law, educational systems, militaries, religions, politics, all of it, not one exception, every one of them is couched in the human nature to win, control, dominate, and be right because it was created by a human being who wanted to
Coming
win.
from a human perspective with the limited awareness that we have of our own power and ability to align with epigenetically our purpose, our mission. If the universe, and here's kind of what I'm thinking, I mentioned earlier that we're all cosmic consciousness condensed into form, becoming aware. Well, that has perfect order couched within it because we're all, according to the Vedas, 15,000-year-old Sanskrit material, right? They say we're all divine threads connected to source, capable of God consciousness. Well, what does that mean? We're creators, just as you're saying in that control dominance agreement. What I can't rattle it off because you said a lot more than I have. It's it's similar and yet a bit different because there's a series of patterns of flow, if you will, of choices that are made available to a person, an individual, or a collective, depending, who is seeking that understanding or that capacity to be in the right place at the right time, to be, the word submissive is not necessarily the best, but to acquiesce to that, to the needs of the moment rather than the needs of the self.
To win, control, dominate, and be right.
It's,
Here's the opposite. Here's the other side
and,
of that coin. The other side
okay,
of it is: do you, as a human being, or do you know any other human being on the planet who has ever wanted to lose, be controlled, be dominated, and be wrong? Never. Unless you're running a
Well, there's
scam,
multiple times I've thought things and hoped I was wrong.
but you want it to be right. You didn't want to be
The
right.
fact is that not knowing, there's no need to be right. There's a need to discover and understand.
What about being right and not knowing? You can't get out of it. It is an instinct. It's something that must be practiced because that is us. We must win, control, dominate, and be right. We go to war over it.
I
Our right,
understand,
our righteousness.
which is an old paradigm. Now, based on Darwinian principles. What about this shift that we're taking place that's going from the Piscean to the Aquarian age? And I realize we're getting into the esoteric stuff, which is also a science and has been for a long time, much longer than the current science that we've had. We've just been in denial of it. However, in this time, or in addition to, during this time, there's a transition between one age to the other in which it was identified or notably visible by the acceleration of awareness and consciousness, and that spilled out into books and tapes and TV shows and movies and music all through the 60s and 70s in preparation through this or for the preparation of this escalation of consciousness. Now, there's one school of thought, Jose Arguelles put it forth in the Mayan uh, calendar interpretations, in that there was a 50-year window between the harmonic convergence, which was August 16th and 17th, I believe, in 1987, and a 50-year window, which would end at similar times in 2037. But at the apex of that, which was the solstice of 2012, everybody was thinking, oh, the world's going to end, right? No, it's not an end. It's the end of a cycle and the beginning of a new cycle. And that news cycle takes that awareness that's been garnered, which is not far more, but at least greatly accelerated toward that understanding of cosmic consciousness being embodied. And that those things that don't resonate with it, like the old paradigm that you're talking about, rise to the surface for examination and change, transformation into not having to rule, dominate, kill others, all of those kinds of things, which are really not, they're human, they're not divine, and I say divine, they're not life-friendly activities. So this change that's happening, there's more respect for life, for self, for planet, others, and this desire to diversity inclusion, right? That's one sign of that, where it's just been introduced. We've gone hog wild over it and tried to introduce it into everything because that's what we do. Now, if we step back from that and say, okay, now what's this pattern that's taking place here? Is it actually the development and evolution of a planetary society? Or is it just something that we're looking at that's evidenced in calendars and scriptures and other, not necessarily sacred texts, but people who believe that these sacred texts from all different cultures are basically saying the same thing, that we're in a process of evolving consciously and toward this, many call it the age of enlightenment. Well, what's that really mean? Do we move beyond that command and control, that dominance of things, unaware of how the holistic system actually works and wanting to understand it to be harmonious with it instead of raping, pillaging, and plundering it like we have?
It's life doesn't know any of those things. Life only wants to survive. And it's not just physical survival, it's ideological survival also.
Mm-hmm.
If for no other reason than we have a neocortex that could figure that out. But the fact that we have a neocortex doesn't make your philosophical point of view correct. And that's where I get my first chapter in my book is what is truth. You,
Hmm.
you can come up with any philosophical point of view you want, and you can justify it by X, Y, and Z, and A, B, and C, and everything else in life that you point to that says, you see, I'm vindicated. The problem is,
I'm not attempting to be vindicated. I'm just observing
I'm
what
talking about
has
you.
existed before us and what it indicates.
It only indicates again my noticing of it is that all human beings, regardless of philosophical points of view, want to win, control, dominate, and be right.
Hmm.
That an inescapable um, what word am I looking for? An inescapable instinct. Instincts have to be played out. You cannot not do an instinct.
But at what level is that instinct? Is that instinct coming from the center of our being, or is it coming from some belief system that we think we have to live?
The fetal psychology. The title of the book is Taming the Fetal Tyrant and its ancestral delusional love stories. The love stories are the ideological points of view that have existed for thousands of years in the human consciousness, just made up as they go along to win, control, dominate, and be right. They're delusional because you can't prove them. That's the definition of being deluded, believing in something that you cannot prove. And you can't prove any of these philosophical points of view, but you'll kill over them. We've proven that you like it or not like it for killing them, for killing it.
So
Is
what
it,
should, so here's where we're talking, if I may, apologies for interrupting, but that gives me the question of, okay, what about those who are living their lives in ways that um, seek harmony and service, not dominance?
give me an example.
Um, People that, well, here's perfect one, people that like to go out and build houses for humanity.
Are they expressing their human nature to win, control, dominate, and be right with that philosophical point of view?
I think they're simply wanting to serve others to the capacity that they're able to and
Because
help others.
that's the
Now,
way. That's the
it,
way they think they're winning, controlling, dominating, and being right. To pick that
but winning, controlling, and dominating what?
their own lives, to behave a certain way.
Well,
Jihadists, same thing. The Pope does the same thing. Mother Teresa did the same thing. North American Indians did the same thing. They all had their philosophical points of view, and they're all right until somebody came along to step on their feet, and
yeah,
then they.
and say, well, wait a minute. Let's look at that a different direction. Okay, I can see your point there. I'm still having difficulty with it, but
Work with me.
I'm working with you, man. Um,
There was one person who said when I was talking to them in my dental chair, I said, so, I told them about win, control, dominate, and be right. They agreed with three of the four.
that's really a dentist's point of view, right?
No, it's a human point of view. I
I'm
didn't
just kidding,
do
man.
it. But he said I had agreed with three of the four, but I don't want to dominate anybody. Do you know how ubiquitous it is that you sit, not you, but a person who could sit there and say, I disagree with you. I don't want to dominate anybody. And never realizing that disagreement
That's the domination.
is an actual domination.
I see your point.
That's how,
And
that's how subtle
so
it is.
maybe what triggered me was the preconceptions I had about those words,
That's the point.
right?
Cultural came from your
So
culture.
yeah, totally, totally. My wife and I, perfect examples. She's from what was Leningrad, the USSR. She grew up there, was trained as a piano pedagogue in that Soviet system, which was command and control. You did everything by the book. And it was disciplined. The educational process was just phenomenal. However, different culture. We got together in 2017, or not 2016, actually. Um, and I met her at a Kundalini yoga teacher training graduation. So I knew that there was a high mentality in her just by that fact. Didn't know that she was going to be there. But anyway, and we came together in such a way where we recognized the depths of each other and then spent and still have some of those cultural difference moments where we have to step back and talk through our perspectives in order to find something that works harmoniously with us. Because we don't want to dominate each other. We want to love each other. Now, if that's a domination, then so be it.
What
But
is love?
love to me is being there, being totally vulnerable, trusting another with your life and wanting to serve them with yours.
You want to try this on for size? Would you stay with your wife if you decided that she was not giving you what you wanted in the relationship? And would she stay with you if she decided you were not giving her what she wanted in the relationship?
Absolutely, we would, at least for a time, because we talk about it, and we have.
And
And that's
when you
part
decide,
of,
but when you
and
decide, no, that's a compromise. That's
um,
different. That's different.
well, I think it's a no negotiation. It could be compromise, but you're working something out, right?
But
Um,
they
in
ask the
the
question.
past, I have had that experience where there was a recognition that, okay, this isn't working, and we agreed to disagree and separate, but we did so as friends.
That wasn't my point. My point was you will never stay with anybody unless you get what you want from them. That is what the process of the whole dating system is about. You're checking out whether or not the other person will give you what you want, generally, philosophically, and a lot physically.
Philosophically, yes, and yet we've got so many destructive, dysfunctional relationships of people that stay together that shouldn't be, and
That's
sometimes end up killing each other.
that's the point. We break up with someone when we don't get what we want from them. And we do that in the middle of our dating process because we're moving on to the next
Isn't
person.
that really what self-love is? If you're not getting your needs met, and by that other, however, they're unable to, they may be willing, they're just unable. That's a possibility too. And the self-love that one carries says, no, wait a minute, I got to set some boundaries here. I'm not going to tolerate this because I'm truly not getting what I need.
To rest my case.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
And
And
you have
that's a tough process to go through on any level, right? And especially when you're in a relationship and you've got children, you've got, and I experienced that early on. I've got 4 kids and 7 great grandkids from an early, for lack of a better, practice marriage that I experienced this. I wasn't getting, and evidently she wasn't getting what she needed either. I was busy trying to support, nurture, and grow our family, and in that downtime that she had, she kind of went other directions. But
but you were not on the same page philosophically.
absolutely,
You
yeah.
you were not getting what you wanted. Now, does getting what you want,
How do you find that though? In
well,
another, what are the signs to recognize? Oh, this person might actually be that. Is that, that's a full sensory experience, isn't it?
come from in the book. The first thing is what is truth? And if a person believes XYZ while you're dating them, but you believe in ABC, you don't have a complementary truth. You have opinions, which I find are opinions are biases, prejudices, and faiths. You look it up in the thesaurus,
Sure, sure.
that's what they are.
Right. And
Truth
you
is,
don't necessarily know what those are
well, I
because
found a
you
way.
ignore them at first because you think it'll get better, and you don't talk about it because you risk rejection.
But here's a simple sentence that you could use in finding out what truth is. If something is the truth, it must, at all times, be true for every single person on the planet.
Hmm.
If it's not that, it's an opinion, a bias, a prejudice, and a faith. There's only two things in the world. It's either a truth on one side of the hand or an opinion on the other. And you must be able to prove your truth, not your opinion. You must be able to prove your truth by way of the scientific method. It's the only thing available to us to win, control, dominate, and be right.
I love testing hypotheses, right?
Test, test it. I
Yeah,
want
and
you.
that's it. That's it, Steve. And that's what we are unwilling to do is put our truth, what we think it is, on the chopping block and whack away at it.
That's what you're afraid of. It's an opinion.
Yep.
Thank you for sharing. Pat you on the back.
Yeah.
But now, if you want to know if where I'm coming from is the truth, I could give you a lot of examples because the truth is an equation. E equals MC squared. Is that a truth or is that an opinion? You see what I mean?
Been proven to be true.
That's
Now,
right.
and yet, okay, that um, given those facts and figures, right, we're still just scratching the surface. Quantum theory and quantum physics and particle physics are taking those numbers to an extreme level of trying to figure out, like Nepean Close in their triadic dimensional distinction vortical paradigm, where they found the equations that show that humans have this nine-dimensional bandwidth. Doesn't eliminate other dimensions, just that we operate in this nine-dimensional framework, and it fits synchronistically with an experience that I had in 1989 with a um, multi-level, multi-plane awareness technique that was developed by William Swigard in the 1950s. And it took people through nine planes of consciousness. I don't know if planes and dimensions are synonymous. I suspect they're pretty close to that.
I don't know
Um,
what that means. What does nine planes of consciousness mean? Can we use them?
so absolutely, we do. We are them. We just don't
Is that
know it. So
is that
looking from
provable?
from
No,
a,
now you see that's where the problem is. Just saying it's there
well, I understand.
is not proving
But you
it's
didn't give
there.
me a chance
I'm
to
sorry.
elucidate. That's okay. I mean, you and I both probably, it's like, no, wait a minute, right? So the nine planes experience that I had, and thousands of people have had them. We have nine bodies on each plane. They're finer and finer in their vibratory rates and consciousness and capacity and connectivity. And there's some references in other volumes of this kind of structure, just never down to that kind of intimate level where there's a process that one can go through to experience it. Now, the experience, if again, one experience random, two beginning to show patterns, three and more, well, this might be the way, there's actual truth in this model, if you will. That was in 89. Then in 2018, preparing for an interview with Jeffrey Mishlove, I run across Nepean Close. Vernon Nepe was actually being interviewed by Jeffrey, and he spoke of this. And so I got their paper, read through it. It's like, wow, it feels like here's the science that backs up my experience that resonated.
Was it science or just conjecture?
No, they had the math for it. And it's called the triadic dimensional distinction vortical paradigm. And so they published their paper in 2010. Now, there
Is
is
it?
the narrative that goes along with that, but they've got the math to back it up based on what had been presented so far in the uh, particle physics, I guess it would be.
Can it be explained to people how to use those nine dimensions,
Yes.
or they're just out there?
Well, when you consider this cosmic consciousness condensed into form, that happens in layers. Each one of those layers has greater access to infinite intelligence for the individual, not necessarily beyond the individual. Individuals fit into groups, right? You have all of them that, if they're in this particular harmonic, if you will, could be slightly different vibrations, but they're in this harmonic, then you might have a group of people that are doing something together in the world that's of service, or maybe not even of service. They've just agreed to do something together. So there's a certain um, collective vibration, if you will, that comes together in that. So in that development of the experience of being a creator. Now, this, for me, I've been working with this for decades, trying to figure out, okay, I get it. How do we use it? And it comes in that attention, intention, and interaction activity that you speak of, right? That is in some ways the dominance of, it's not any dominance of anything other than self and being able to align with two things. One's the genetic framework that we're given, which is a design that we have. We have no junk DNA. It's all integrated and operational. We just aren't aware of it because you've got free will and we can choose to do whatever we want. That's another form of dominance, but it doesn't have to do with the pureness of that self-love that connects us with our design, which happens genetically and through whatever frequency that spirit soul that we have that gives us consciousness, because as you know, consciousness is not in the body, although it's navigating through it. How does that then bring us into this understanding that this dominance that you're talking about can be used for developing a greater connectedness with life as we know it?
You just pick your philosophical point of view, stick to it because you think it's the truth, even if it's not provable scientifically to be the truth. You continue acting on it for your entire life. It becomes a truth for you. But all it is about your personal philosophical point of view survival. And getting to your free will versus predetermination, I'm sure you've heard some conversations on that.
I,
Um,
I've heard and have had, and then I also have my direct experience, which again, it's not an opinion, it's an experience.
you've heard of Sapolsky?
Yeah.
He says there's no such thing as free will. It's all predetermined. And
And
he had
in some ways
conversations with
I
Neil
agree
deGrasse.
with that because there's a parameter that you've got to work with, and it's not going to be, perfect, if you will, um, because you have choices within that. However, those choices can be better defined to enter into a higher level relationship between yourself and that infinite intelligence you have access to.
What is the self?
So that's a great question. Is it the little self or the big self? Is it the self that wants to be dominant, or is it the self that wants to be all it can be?
Um, I
And
don't see
those
much of
two aren't necessarily the same.
I don't see that much of a difference. To me, a self wants to survive any way it can. It wants to win, control, dominate, and be right so it can eat. Something else has to die for you to survive. That's the law of life.
Okay.
And your self is involved. You have a sense of self, even if you don't know where it comes from. I equate it with the human nature because I've asked people, is there a difference between winning, controlling, dominating, being right, and yourself and the spirit and the soul? I say they're all the same.
Well, in all reality, we do have this expression that's going around called oneness. If everything is one, then what does it look like? How do we participate in that? How does it play out through us? And
Winning is
and
one.
is there an ascending order to it? Because we all, the whole process, right? Chaos to order. What we think is chaos are simply patterns we don't recognize or incorporate yet.
No, isn't it supposed to be order to chaos?
No, that's
That's,
look at the universe. The universe is constantly refining itself, just as we are. We have grown through hundreds, at least thousands of years of civilization, and now we have evolved to the point where we're talking about particle physics. Imagine what it's going to be like years from now when we actually have interaction with beings from other planets
well, they
openly.
want,
Not
they
that
want
they
to win.
aren't already happening, and that they understand this unanimity, if you will, this the union of body and spirit and consciousness in this operational capacity that we have.
But these things need to be defined. What's spirit? What is soul? What is human nature? What is if the universe had perfect um, coherence, if you will, and then developed into a progressive, which is still progressing now, of entropy, then the universe must have been highly organized when it first exploded, and now is becoming more and more chaotic, which
Well,
I
see,
find.
that's a human point of view, and I have other references from people and myself who have spoken with others that have far greater intelligence, capacity, and movement around the universe that tell us that if we see an anomaly or entropy, we're not seeing things correctly. That's an opinion based on what we think is true, based on what we've been able to discover so far and interpret about how we live and what life is.
Well, that's not what Hawking said. Hawking said that as the universe continues to expand, there's going to be less and less
Again, that's
attraction
one
to
person
particles.
on a planet that has no experience of other worlds or interaction with them. He's developed all this through his own observations of basically, a limited space.
But
He's got one planet with a civilization that has evolved through all kinds of crafty, dominant,
mathematics.
not just mathematics, but people who have chosen to dominate and control others for their own self-interests. And now we're getting to a point where, wait a minute, we can't do this anymore because profit over people and planet's not working. We're destroying each other. What's a better route to take? Is this something that, because anytime anybody who loses a loved one for whatever reason, there's a sense of, especially if they are taken early or killed in some way or off doing something, there's that separation anxiety that takes place, right? We don't want that. Why would we inflict that? Why would we send our children to other children to try and kill them just because
The,
we believe
the
differently?
Chinese had a way around it. The Chinese call it, um, hold on. The Chinese call it being, well, I don't have to give the exact word, but too possessive. In other words, the more things you want, the more stress you can be under. So want less, you'll have less stress. We get into problems because human beings want to win, control, dominate, and be right, which means
That's my point.
we want. And the Chinese said a long time ago with the Chinese philosophers, get rid of your possessiveness of things. That's the thing that causes stress.
And yet they're a world power, right?
Well,
And there's
but
several of them.
that wasn't the. I was not looking at it from that point of view. From the world power, just has to be, a cyclic, move. It used to be Britain, France, Britain, United States, now China.
Right.
So there'll be somebody after China also. But again, it's all within the realm of win, control, dominate, and be right, because that's the human nature.
Is it possible that people can choose to care for one another to the point where they can unify and harmonize and be part of a holistic system that supports life and
Yes,
doesn't
it is.
destroy?
But it will come from the realization that this is the best way to survive. Darwinian survival is to choose this kind of cooperation with each other, just like clans decided to bond with each other for, and wolves, all the animals that have,
Well, if that were so, then because we've got, diminished capacity, we have cultures, situations around the world where there's hunger and poverty and ways of alleviating it that we don't do.
why?
Exactly. That's why.
Because of the human nature. The people who are in control want to win, control, dominate, be right with their particular philosophical point of view, and they don't care about people who are dying in the fields. That's
So
the truth of it for everybody. That's the truth of it for every single person on the planet.
can that change?
Of course, just change your mind. Decide.
Do you see, in relation to some of the things that I've offered as far as this transition from one age to another and coming into another period, do you see these kinds of conversations? And I'm not sure, how active you are in that. So just since we had this massive shutdown globally, the ability to sequestrate, not the ability, the forced sequestration gave us the ability to self-examine. Some did, some didn't. Some self-examined is like, okay, I got to figure out how to beat the system better. Others
That's
said, wait a minute.
controlling, dominating, and being right. How to beat the
Right,
system better.
right. So that's many who wanted to go back to the old and continue with it. There's an entirely new group now that are looking at, okay, how do we learn how to collaborate? The virtual space that opened up in COVID allowed these people who had these other ideas or notions that wanted to try them out. It allowed them to find some place to coalesce and talk about things in intellectually humble and psychologically safe environments to explore these kinds of things. And then I've already seen that ripple out into activities in the world that are far different than what have been happening in this old paradigm of dominance and control. So how do you see, there's another thing about entropy that just came to mind from these. There was a scientist in Canada. He ran Canada's UFO investigation program in the 1950s, similar to the US's Project Blue Book. And he kept memoirs. So these weren't things that he necessarily thought others were going to read, but he had conversations with what he called people from elsewhere. And one of the things that they said to him is specifically about entropy, that entropy to them is a measurement, time to them, significant difference. Time to them is a measurement in the change of entropy. So as this, theoretically, if you were working on something with others and that agreement that you had, the strategy, the plan, everything just worked magnificently and things flowed really well, what would that sense be? Kind of like Csikszentmihalyi says with the psychology of optimal experience, flow, right? There's this sense of timelessness in it, or that time compresses when in actuality it's a lot longer than it feels like because that harmony exists.
Is the second law of thermodynamics immutable?
Howard Bloom says it is. He and I had a conversation about that, and I
As
tend
a
to
law.
agree with him
As a law.
to a certain point. Well, the law is about closed systems. And if you close the system, yeah, it's probably going to eventually fall apart because you've separated it.
So that's how you have to use that paradigm in order to get out of the human morass of going downhill, so to speak. You have to lay this stuff out on a table and treat it as though anything you decide to do has to be as lawful as the second law of thermodynamics. If it's not, it's your opinion. You'll try it out. If it fails, don't cry.
Right. Well, here's a perfect example of that. I'm operations director for a global peace movement called Live and Let Live. We're kind of slow out of the gate because we're taking some time to really build a foundation with it. We've got two principles. One is a moral, one is a legal. The moral, which is just be an excellent human, right? And aspirations to be that.
Yeah. Who
And
decides
that's
excellence
and
in
that's
humans?
different for everybody and in by community standards, by individual standards, by regional, bioregional. It's a decision process of what's best for, how do we behave in the best ways that are possible. The
So it's an
second,
opinion.
the second principle, which is what I really want to get to, is a legal principle. It's don't aggress. And we seek to change the law to remove aggression. So then aggression is defined as anything that is done toward your private property, which includes you, your money, your time, your house, your belongings, whatever. So anybody that aggresses upon you, that's not cool, right? That could be done for an individual, could be done at a governmental level as well. So why would you want to aggress on someone except for exactly what you're talking about, being dominant? And that's the behaviors that we've had as a human race up until now. So in order to
Even if you
change that, we've got to change the way we behave towards each other.
even
And
if you
we have
decide
to
to,
have agreement as to what that really means.
that's the point, the agreement.
Right.
And the agreement should be based on a scientific understanding of what's going to happen in any side road
Well, the
you
thing
decide
is,
to
Steve,
take.
that scientific understanding is not data. These are people we're talking about. So there's behaviors, there's experiences. It's not numbers, it's people. So
And
how does that
the
how do we
moment you
get
get
through that?
it
How does
falls
that science apply to move people in a direction that's beneficial?
well. Look at it from the point of view that human beings, as a law, and all life, even if we're visited by aliens from outer somewhere else, even that life
They don't
wants
like
to
that term.
wants to win, control, dominate, and be right. To me, that sounds like a law of survival: to win, control, dominate, and be right in whatever point of view you come up with. Now, if you're sitting at a table, what I did in my book, I said, okay, tell you what, because I've always had this interesting thing about religion and the belief in God and stuff like that. I sat down all the icons of all religions at a table, which I called like an ecumenical council. And their job was to decide which is the true religion, which is the true God, which is the true of anything else that you can come up with. And the first, I made a joke of it and I said, they're probably having trouble right now deciding on the shape of the table, let alone which is the true religion and true God. The point is that I was making is there's no such thing as that type of ideology that's the truth for every single person on the planet. Do you know how many
That
Christian
may be true,
denominations
but
are
that
there?
doesn't mean it's not present somewhere and experienceable. And
Somewhere else.
my direct experience edifies that. And granted, I was younger, had some Christian upbringing, felt like there was more, didn't feel like what was being taught was being followed. So there was some, disparity there. And I prayed to know what truth was because I wanted to find being adopted, orphaned and adopted. That also gave me this impetus to find my place to fit in the world. And so I prayed to know what truth was one night. And it was the most fervent prayer I've ever made and was willing to die for it if necessary. So then a few days later, I have this experience with a voice that I had never identified, just thought it to be truth because it never proved otherwise to me. And I've had it since I was 5 years old and different experience than yours. what it asked me was if I was willing to die for what I believed in. First thing I thought about was Christ consciousness. It felt a little empty. I didn't question it. I moved on to cosmic consciousness. That was ubiquitous. That's something that's been expressed in all of those religions, faiths, cultures, things of that nature. It felt full, so I said yes. Moments later, I'm in the midst of this amazingly the sensation of this white light. I left my body, turned to look at my body laying across my dorm room bed, turned back to look where I was going, and before I could get turned around, I was engulfed by this light. It had an effervescent, iridescent, high-pitched sensation to it. When I realized that, I also realized I was thinking. So I was thinking I could not be dead. And that gave me the next question. Is there more? And so through that following experience, which I shared with you earlier, I had an experience of cosmic consciousness, came back into my body afterwards, and knew that we are all cosmic consciousness condensed into form, just unaware. Now, years later, once I began studying um, all the different religions, nearly all of them have a trinity of some form in that. So my question was, okay, where did this really come from? Because if it's in everything, it had to have come from someplace else and been supplanted in these different areas for, or not necessarily supplanted, but suggested, if you will, or incorporated because of others' experience of something that indicated that it was there in some form, a trinity. One of the other Swigart experiences or techniques was the multi-level awareness. I was preparing to go through one of those one day with a facilitator sitting next to me, and I'd met my uh, it's going to get a little esoteric. I met my guide in college not too long after my experience. I was reading Castanada's stuff and wondered if I had one. And a few days later, this Indian face appeared in my vision and the name Zephyr simultaneously. So I got to know him over the years. And here, this was 1989. I he shows up as I'm preparing to go through this multi-level awareness, and he waves to me and says, simply come. And, this inner vision that some have, some are able to use it better than others. So I paid attention. I exited my body very easily. We traveled for a while, don't know how long it was, or didn't know how long it was. During that time, I asked him where we were going. He said, just wait, you'll see. Minutes later, we had a conversation on the way. Then we show up at this three sun system with about a dozen other planets in a planar orbit around them, different distances. And the three spheres were probably 100 times bigger than the what looked like planetoids at the time. And I felt like Jodie Foster coming out of contact and just, tears streaming down my eyes at the awe that I felt just in seeing this. Then I hear a voice and it says, we are not only your forefathers, we're also the forefathers of your solar system. And I turned around, I started to ask questions and I say turned around, I started to ask questions, couldn't feel the turn there. And Zephyr says, nope, that's it. That's all you need. You'll figure it out. And back we came. Well, the journey back, I realized, okay, that's a macro, micro, proton, electron, neutron. That fits. Hydrogen, what's that? Because that doesn't fit the three model. Well, most prevalent gas powers the sun, and it's a bonding agent for our DNA helix.
Hello?
Ah, we're back.
We're back.
Well, evidently that was a non sequitur. Um,
Well, I was just
and I
wondering
got to
how
go. We've
close.
been on here for almost 2 hours. I'm going to need to go.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, things to do. I usually only allow 90 minutes. We've got into a great conversation, and I don't think it's going to be usable material. I might use the audios from it, but production quality is not to standard.
Right.
Um,
I understand.
but definitely, you left me with lots of stuff to ponder, and hopefully I did you as well. I didn't finish that story, um, but if you don't mind, I'll finish that. Um, I'm not sure if you're curious or not, or whether uh, you're just listening. So on the way back, proton, electron, neutron, hydrogen didn't fit. Bonding agent for a DNA helix. Is it possible that hydrogen may be the conduit for consciousness, as that it allows that third wire, if you will, in the circuit to come through? And just like, for instance, the yin and yang, I think, is a cross section of the DNA with one side the lights on, one side the lights off, because that's what creates the spin that brings us into form. Um, and there's math on that too. So in that, so I got back, still had lots of questions, right? And I asked the facilitator, I said, okay, how long did it take us to get there? Because he was listening. This process was designed to be able to project your consciousness into what most people call their light body and travel with it. It's basically just an astral journey. But it's a conscious one that is interactive. So the facilitator was asking me questions as I was reporting what I was experiencing. He wasn't prompting me to have the experience. I was reporting back what I was experiencing as a result of Zephyr asking me to leave. So it took us 8 minutes to get there and 8 minutes to get back. I found that very interesting. The only reference I've been able to find for the speed of thought, which I can't see that it'd be anything else, was in the Urantia book, and it says that it's 841 trillion miles per second, which would kind of explain if that were that centralized. If we have that trinity, then there are many others on other worlds that have the same thing because the universe replicates itself. And those who have helped create it formlessly then figure out how to incorporate bodies to experience it. That's what I tentatively am pondering the possibility of being true and testing it.
You got to be able to give somebody their own personal experience of it.
I do.
And do they have it every single time?
They have their own individual experience, and almost every one of them, especially with the multiplane awareness technique, have the similar experience of their individuality through that same structure. So it's there. It's just we don't have the mechanisms or machinery yet to analyze and or measure. Because we're just now measuring electromagnetic fields around the body. They've been there forever, right? We have right now, and this isn't philosophically, this is some call it pseudoscience. Let's say it's science. The electromagnetic energy, the aura, can be measured. It is diminished when you are in the past or the future in your being, and it's magnified when you're fully present in the moment. Now, I had a direct experience of that again with a gal that was basically showing others the difference using dowsing rods. And I got there early, so I asked her, I said, explain to me, how do you do this? She goes, I'll show you. And we're the only two people in the room. It's a 40-foot square room. And she says, I want you to stand in this corner, close your eyes, go to a past event and go to it as much as you possibly can. And I'm going to start in the other opposite corner, hypotenuse to the right triangle. And I'm going to walk towards you. I'm going to clear the rods and I'm going to walk towards you and I'm going to stop where they open and we're going to mark the spot. Then we're going to do the same thing with the future. And then we're going to do the same thing with the present. So we went through the past and the future first. They opened up in almost the same place. Then she picks up a rock in the windowsill, puts it in my hand, says, now focus on this. In the past and future, it was about 6 foot in diameter. In the present, she barely got 2 steps in from the other side of the room before they opened. Now, is that science?
Put a physicist in there, we'll find out.
So you put the rods in a physicist's hands. What's he going to
Well,
experience?
I'd be looking for him to describe the phenomenon from a physical point of view, from his physics.
The physics is not going to deny what happened, though. It's going to simply reveal the math behind it. True?
That in itself could be enough to find out what truth.
Oh, you locked up again. Ah, now you're unlocked. Okay. Um, last I heard was that in itself.
I have a great respect, I'm sure you do also, for physicists. And if you put them in a room with that experience, and they see a phenomenon develop, they're going to want to find out why it happened the way it did, and with what is known. And they wouldn't necessarily make it up because they couldn't prove what
Most
is.
physicists will not approach esoteric experiences, period. They won't have anything to do with them.
So then it's left to us to make it up as we go along, right?
Experience. Replicable experience.
Is it repeatable? Reproducible?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I did it a dozen times afterwards with other people because I
Then I'm
wanted to
saying
find out if it would be or not.
the physicist would be interested.
But the thing is, they're not. That's spirit
Well,
stuff, right? And or esoteric or stuff that they just want numbers, data, hard facts. They want machinery that they can use to do computers, right? Nothing to do with energy. They're
but
trying to they're trying to
they
describe it with their numbers, but how do you convert an experience into numbers?
listen, they do that all the time. Even Schrodinger's cat, the thought experiment, it was
What's
a
a
measurement.
thought? Again,
Yeah,
a
but a
thought.
measurement,
I'm not talking
of the
about
thought.
just thinking about stuff and then trying to prove something. I'm talking about having a direct experience of, in this case, two people that's replicable throughout others doing the same thing, getting the same results or similar results, depending on, how tight the people were as to where the rods opened up in the past and the future, and how open they were as to where it opened up in the present. And what she did with me, I was what, 31, 32 at the time. I just been divorced, so I was still, kind of an angry young man, because of how things happened and not to my liking and nor efforts. Um, totally out of my control. Couldn't do anything about it. All I could do was be the best person I could be and look in the mirror and be satisfied with that. Um, but those kinds of things, are where I, feel we need to, again, can't think our way through a system built on vibration. We got to sense our way through it. We have barely scratched the surface. You just use a simple axiom, of the ratio. Five senses, I realize this may be off, but old axiom, five senses, 10% of the brain, right? There's 90% of the brain. You do a simple ratio, you got 45 more senses.
That doesn't, well,
The
you're a
math
friend.
is there. The math
Yeah,
is there based on that, no matter
but
how you want to look at it. Now,
no,
are those
the
45?
reasoning,
Here's
I
what I
don't,
think, though, Steve. Those 45 are simply the five that are in finer operational capacity across those nine planes.
we don't know that. That's just made up.
I'm doing math. I'm taking a ratio that was accepted as an
You're
axiom for
saying that
a
that
long time.
ratio, but that ratio does not necessarily apply to the next understanding that
Well,
you're thinking is supposed to, agree with.
I'm well, I'm not asking for, I'm just saying, is this possible to look at things? Because you've got the ratio, you extrapolate it, you got these numbers.
Well, but the nine is not necessarily applicable to what you're saying it is. I mean, you're saying it because you want to believe it. That's where the
No,
opinion comes
no,
from.
I'm not saying it because I want to believe it. I'm saying because there's scientific proof that Nepi and Close put together for it, not mine. I didn't
Would
invent the multiplane awareness technique. That was
could
William
you
Stuckart.
send me that information so I could look it over?
I'm sorry?
Could you send me that information so I could look it over?
Well, you can't really look over the multiplane. That's an
Well,
experience. The triadic dimensional distinction vortical paradigm, yeah, I can send you a link to it. Absolutely.
I'd appreciate it because I want to get more understanding of what you're talking about.
Okay, cool. Yeah, more than be happy. Um, how am I going? Well, yeah, I can send it to you through I can find it and send it to
You
your text on your phone because
you have my email
you
address,
you
don't
are getting my emails now. Yeah, weren't sure before. Hey, Steve, I gotta say, uh, this has been enjoyable. I love being able to talk like this, and neither, we were both animate about things, and yet we both respect each other, and I appreciate that.
you? It's not easy to find people like us to talk to.
I've been looking and continue to look, and I totally agree. It is not. We are in that, I'd say less than half, maybe even less than a tenth of a percentile of the population at present, from my experience. Because I get all kinds of grief with when I start talking about stuff, right? I don't care whether you want to argue with me or not. It doesn't matter, right? You're not going to refute my direct experience and tell me it's not true and argue with me, or you're not going to. I've had, Bible thumpers I start talking to them about my direct experience with Jesus, which I have had in front of others who saw him too. Mass hypnosis or a group, delusion? I don't think so. Um, but they will, start flipping through the Bible and start quoting a bunch of stuff back to them. I said, wait a minute. Jesus said, words in your heart. We are the living word. It's not in the book. And they're like, oh, but, that can't be. I can't, we can't experience what we're told is possible. That's kind of oxymoronic, isn't it?
If you were brought up in a different culture, you wouldn't believe it. That's the point.
You believe your direct experience.
But you wouldn't have that direct experience if you were brought up in
I
a different.
don't know that. And you don't either. The experience may be
You
the
don't.
same. It may have different words to describe it. Right?
Well, to me, this sounds like wanting to win, control, dominate, and be right.
I don't give a shit. This is my experience. I don't care. I
Li-
don't want to be dominant. This is my experience. I'm going to see what happens as a result of it and the desire that I have to connect with others to explore their own experience that may or may not be similar, but we all have this idea that yes, we can be better towards each other, and how can we facilitate that?
Just decide. Just decide that your particular point of view shouldn't dominate everybody, and come up with something that everybody, more or less everybody, could agree upon as a truth for everyone on the planet that is provable scientifically. It's the only way we're going to get out of this.
I'm doing that with one with Live and Let Live and the other with Planetary Citizens and the model of the co-creation wheel and breaking it down to the different areas and the pioneers that are doing things scientifically and factually and materialistically in the world to support that as a holistic system. We haven't done that yet. This is one of the things we're missing. We've got all the distribution systems that can feed, clothe, and house and take care of medically everyone. We produce enough food for 3 planets. We just don't distribute it well, which is why you got starving people in Africa because of the hoarding of the resources. And they're not giving a shit. So, and it takes individuals to come up collectively together, raising a voice to say, wait a minute, we don't want to do this anymore. Here's a better way, and have the model in ready to pull the trigger on that can replace it. Like Bucket,
You're
even
gonna
Socrates says,
you're
don't
gonna go
fight
to
the
war over it?
system, create a better one.
Will you go to war over it?
No, absolutely not.
What if it took it?
What's that?
What if it took going to war over?
No, it won't.
Well, people are not going to be that willing to give up what they believe.
I understand that.
So you're going to have to go to war.
Nope, not a
What
part
are
of
you
it.
going to
Not
what are
going
you
to
going
go to
to
war, not going
what are
to
you going to do?
aggress.
How are
This
you going to
kind
feed?
of resonance, when it can be demonstrated and people have a direct experience of, they will lose the desire to fight.
Now you're talking about science. Those are the cornerstones of science.
Right.
Demonstrate it, have them observe it. That's the scientific method.
Exactly. I've got a
But I'm
business
saying
plan for a
if
model
they don't
school that
if they
was
don't come
built.
from the if they don't come from the proper cultural perspective, you're not going to get that from them.
Don't need to, right? Small groups can affect large numbers with the efforts and the trickle through. They just have to be the right small groups. And because of that, for lack of a better, infinite capacity that we have to access the things that are necessary to do so, and the momentum that we can create by taking action toward, and then using the quantum, it's quantum entanglement at a physical level. So anyway, again, I really appreciate you, Steve. It's just, you opened my mind and my eyes to some things that I hadn't really thought about yet and need to consider in the application and distribution of the information that I'm attempting to present.
If I sent you a PDF copy of my book, would you read it?
Yeah.
Would you give a Would you give
How
a
thick,
review?
how thick is it? Would you do the same?
Sure.
Not, I'm not going to ask
Not
you to
on
do all
not on 100
42.
of them. Not on a
After,
hundred of them.
but you know what? What was his name? Oh, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The answer is 42. I figure if I get 42 books, then maybe I'll get an answer. Right. Um, I talked to Irvin Laszlo Man, he pales me by 75 books he's got. Um, I don't know. I've probably got another 10 or 12 at least in me. And with the advent with AI and being able to query I built a chat GPT for planetary citizens. It's referencing which you can ask scientific questions of, by the way. But it references, I've got 20 documents. Um, Probably 12 of them are ancient texts, Vedas, Bhagavad Gita, Egyptian Book of the Dead, Tao Te Ching, all those kinds of stuff. And then a few more modern things, and then several of my own books. So I use it so it writes in my style in answering queries through the website, which I thought was kind of a nifty idea. I call it Citizen.
I like that.
It's pretty cool. Yeah, if you go to, if you get a chance, planetarycitizens.net. And I'll send you that in the email too, with
Please do.
and then you can send your PDF. How many pages is your book?
236.
Oh, that's
230.
reasonable.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very reasonable. Yeah, they say, here's a stat that I found out recently. Books under 100 pages get read 60%.
That's what my publisher told me.
Yeah,
They
so
didn't want to make it my length. I couldn't complete all the information with
I
prose.
know. I know. That my so you'll love this. Stubbing My Toe on Purpose is subtitled A Seminal View of Consciousness, Cosmology, and the Congruence of Science and Spirituality.
We're going to read that.
It's
That's a
500 pages.
complicated title.
Huh?
That's a complicated title.
Well, yeah. Even with this, without the subheading, Stubbing My Toe on Purpose, double
Oh,
entendre, theory of
yeah.
everything, right? I'm stubbing it on purpose because I'm questioning everything. And I'm stubbing it because I'm looking for purpose, for being. I think I know what that is. That's the message I was given as a teen. I've been
This
testing that ever
concept.
since. If this is so, then time will prove it to be as long as I continue staying focused, open, vulnerable, and willing. So
Hello?
that takes out, no, I
Oh,
paused there. I shut up.
okay.
I
I
do
was I
shut
was
up
thinking.
occasionally, right? So let's reconvene. I don't know when it'll be. Get your camera working. Buy a new, I know you're probably on limited income, but buy a freaking laptop, will you?
I'll take it over. I'll take it over to the Geek Squad. See what they have to
No,
say.
no, 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 no. They will tell you the same thing. If that laptop is 5 or 6 years old, it's junk
Oh,
compared to if it's, my guess is it's probably older than that from the way it looked. So they're not that expensive. You can get a refurbished laptop with everything you need for a couple $100, maybe three. Doesn't have to be the latest and greatest. That's I go to used to be Newegg or Tiger Direct. I think it's just now Newegg. Um, I'll send you that so you can look. And I bought computers, laptops through them, refurbished at greatly reduced prices. Never had a problem. So I know it works. And they're reputable. And if you do have a problem, you send stuff back and they'll replace it. But I would
I know.
advise, especially if you're going to continue and um, if you're looking for people to interview you need to have that and to have something set up that's um, more
On
functional.
On a scale of 1 to 10, where do you think I fall?
Right now, with the inability to use your laptop for
No,
it,
no, no. With content.
content. Oh, for you? Oh,
Yeah.
I'd say at least a 9.5 in what we've been talking about from what you've shared with me and the resonance that it's had, however difficult it was for me to listen to, right?
Was it difficult?
Well, some things, because initially I told you those words had a charge for me that I
Yeah.
had to look at and let go in order to fully absorb what you were saying and through that, and thank you for helping me through that, because it wasn't an argument. It kind of was, but it wasn't, right? It was this genuine, okay, I want to understand this. No, you're not quite understanding it. Yeah, okay. And this uh, wonderful exchange that would probably
It
be
was.
excruciating for anybody else, right?
Have you ever heard of the mathematics of words?
Yes, I did.
I thought I came up with that. I put it in the book to have people be hung by their tongues. In other words, if they're going to use words like this is the
Well,
truth,
spellcasting. It's spellcasting. If you want to look at it that way, the words that come out of your mouth have the ultimate power. You cannot take them back.
but you got to know what they mean.
Absolutely.
And people don't. They just use them.
People try to say apocalypse is the end of the world, the destruction of everything. No, that's not what the word means, you idiots. A lot of re-education happening. A lot of education happening. That's what's wonderful. I was just talking to Luba earlier today. It's so, yeah, her name's Luba, by the way. It means love in Russian. And it's so inspiring to be able to have a conversation at the levels that you and I have on a daily basis. It's just, and we can have them. We don't need anybody else, right? It's like, okay, let's go check in with the world and see what's going on. And it took me 59 years to prepare.
Well, I know you got to go, my friend.
I do. I do. I said that 20 minutes ago and we're still hanging out because it's hard to let go. I will let go and we will reconvene. Send me your book. I'll send you the stuff and we'll do it again soon.
Take care, baby.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
The future doesn't need faster AI. It needs coherent intelligence, where human wisdom meets machine precision, revealing hidden friction before it becomes costly. AI Universal Engine, designing a better world.